Kira Valdez stood at the observation window of the Celestial Accord and watched the stars drift by like scattered diamonds. Against black velvet, she had been aboard this ship for 6 months. Now, and she still could not believe she was here, it felt like a distant memory. A blue and green marble spinning somewhere far behind her, and yet everything about her screamed that she came from that world. The other crew members noticed it too. They noticed how she moved with careful precision, how her eyes tracked movement before her mind even registered it, how she could hear footsteps approaching from 3 corridors away. They called her a Deathworlder. Term was not meant as an insult exactly, but it was not a compliment either. It was a classification, a warning label, a way of saying be careful around this one, because her planet tried to kill her every single day, and she survived anyway. Earth was officially designated as a Category 7 Deathworld by the Galactic Concordat. This meant that the planet had extreme temperature variations, dangerous predators, toxic plants, unpredictable weather, seismic activity, and 100 other things that should have wiped out any intelligent species long before they could reach the stars. But humans had not only survived, they had thrived. They had conquered their death trap of a planet, and then looked up at the sky and said, "We want that too." And now here was Kira, one of the first humans to serve on a joint peacekeeping vessel, surrounded by species who had evolved on gentle paradise worlds with stable climates and no predators. Most of the crew kept their distance from her. They were polite, of course, professional even. But she could see the fear in their eyes whenever she walked into a room. They had read the reports about Earth. They knew about the sharks and the lions and the venomous snakes. They knew about the wars humans had fought against each other, the diseases they had survived, the extinction events they had endured. To them, Kira was not just a crew member. She was a living reminder that the universe could produce something beautiful and terrifying at the same time. But there was one crew member who did not seem afraid of her at all. His name was Torvash, and he was a Valkyrie engineer. The Valkyrie were a peaceful species with 4 arms, soft blue skin, and bioluminescent patterns that shifted colors based on their emotions. They were known throughout the galaxy for their technical genius and their gentle nature. Torvash had approached Kira on her very first day aboard the ship. He had walked right up to her while everyone else was pretending not to stare. And he had said, "You are the human, yes, the one from the scary planet." Kira had tensed, expecting another cautious conversation full of barely hidden fear, but then Torvash had smiled, his skin flickering bright orange, which she would later learn meant excitement. And he had said, "I have so many questions. Will you tell me about the octopus? I heard they have 3 hearts and blue blood and can change colors and squeeze through tiny spaces, and I think they sound wonderful." That was how their friendship had begun. Over the following months, Torvash had become the closest friend Kira had ever had. He was curious about everything and afraid of nothing. He asked her about Earth's oceans and mountains and forests. He wanted to know about thunderstorms and earthquakes and volcanoes. He was fascinated by the idea of seasons, of a planet that could be burning hot and freezing cold, depending on when you visited. And in return, he taught her about Valkyrie culture. He showed her how to read the color patterns on his skin so she always knew what he was feeling. He taught her Valkyrie card games that involve 4 hands and made her feel clumsy with only 2. He introduced her to Valkyrie music, which sounded like wind chimes and running water, and made her cry the first time she heard it, though she never told him that they became inseparable. When Kira trained in the combat simulator, Torvash would watch and cheer her on, even though violence made him uncomfortable. When Torvash worked on the ship's engines, Kira would sit nearby and hand him tools and listen to him explain things she barely understood. The other crew members started to relax around Kira because of Torashif, the gentle Valkyrie trusted the Deathworlder. Then maybe she was not so dangerous after all. 6 months into her assignment, the distress signal came. It was from Outpost Cayenne 4. A mining colony on the edge of Concordat's space marauders had attacked. Pirates and criminals who raided isolated settlements for resources and slaves. The colony was under siege and calling for help. Captain Relani, a tall insectoid being with compound eyes and clicking mandibles, gathered the senior crew for a briefing. "We are the closest Concordat vessel," she announced, "but we will not be going alone. The Dravini war fleet has 3 cruisers in the sector, and they will join us for a combined assault." Kira felt a small knot form in her stomach at the mention of the Dravenith. Dravini were a militaristic species with gray skin, angular features, and cold silver eyes. They had been part of the Concordat for centuries, but they had always pushed for expansion and conquest. They did not like humans. Kira had heard the rumors about how Dravini politicians had argued against allowing humanity into the Concordat. They said humans were too violent, too unpredictable, too dangerous. They said letting Deathworlders into galactic society was like inviting a wild animal into your home. The fact that humans were violent was not wrong exactly. Kira knew her own history well enough to admit that, but the Dravini were violent too. They just hid it better behind their military discipline and their political maneuvering. As the Celestial Accord jumped to faster than light speed, Kira found Torvash in the engineering bay. "You are worried," he said immediately, his skin shifting to a concerned shade of purple. "The Dravini," Kira admitted. "I do not trust them. They are our allies." Torvash reminded her gently. "We are all part of the Concordat. I know, but something feels wrong. I cannot explain it." Torvash reached out with one of his 4 hands and squeezed her shoulder. "Then I will stay close to you during the battle," he said. "We will watch each other's backs, yes." Kira smiled despite her unease. "You hate fighting." "I hate seeing my friends get hurt more." His skin flickered warm amber, the color of deep affection. "You are my friend, Kira, my best friend. I will not let anything happen to you." She wanted to tell him that she should be the one protecting him. She was the Deathworlder after all, the one built for survival. But looking at his earnest face and his glowing amber skin, she just nodded. Together, then. Together. When they arrived at Outpost Can 4, the Dravini cruisers were already waiting. Commander Silas Vorn appeared on the view screen, his angular gray face filling the display, his silver eyes cold and assessing. "Celestial Accord," he said in a voice like grinding metal. "We will coordinate our assault. My forces will take the eastern approach. Your ground teams will assault from the west. We will catch the marauders in a crossfire." "Agreed, Commander," Captain Relani replied. "For the Concordat. For the Concordat." Vorn echoed, but his eyes found Kira standing at the back of the bridge, and something flickered in them. Something that made her blood run cold. The transmission ended. Kira suited up in the armory, checking her pulse rifle 3 times, adjusting her armor, running through combat scenarios in her head. Torvash appeared beside her wearing light technical gear instead of combat armor. "Ready?" he asked. She looked at him, at her gentle friend who had never judged her for where she came from, who had seen past the Deathworlder label to the person underneath. "Stay close to me down there," she said. His skin flickered amber again. "Always, Kira, always." The dropship shook violently as it descended through the atmosphere of Outpost. Kind for Kira gripped the overhead rail with one hand and kept her other hand on her pulse rifle. Around her sat 12 other Concordat soldiers, a mix of species, all of them tense and silent as the ship bucked and rattled. Torvash sat beside her with his technical equipment strapped to his back. His skin was cycling through nervous shades of green and yellow, but his 4 hands were steady. He had insisted on coming down with the ground team, even though he was an engineer, not a fighter. Someone needs to disable their defense systems, he had argued, and no one knows technology like a Valkyrie. The dropship hit the ground hard, and the rear doors flew open. Red dust swirled in, carried by hot wind that smelled like sulfur and smoke. Kira was the First one out, boots hit the rocky terrain and her eyes immediately scanned for threats. The mining outpost was a collection of prefabricated buildings clustered around the massive extraction facility. Half of those buildings were on fire now. Black smoke rising into the orange sky. She could hear weapons fire in the distance. The sharp crack of energy weapons and the deeper boom of explosive charges. The Marauders were well armed. Better than the intelligence reports had suggested. "Move out," ordered Sergeant Velix, a four-eyed Tarani who led the ground team western approach. "Stay in formation." Kira fell into position with Torvash right behind her. They advanced through the ruins of the outer settlement, past burned vehicles and collapsed structures. Twice they encountered Marauder patrols, and twice Kira eliminated them before they could raise an alarm. She moved like water, like shadow, like something that had evolved to hunt and kill on. World that offered no mercy. The other soldiers watched her with wide eyes. They had heard stories about Deathworlders, but seeing one in combat was different. Kira did not hesitate, did not flinch, did not waste a single movement. Every shot was precise, every decision instant. "The main facility," Torvash whispered, pointing ahead. "Their command center will be there. If I can reach it, I can shut down their communications and disable their automated defenses." Kira nodded and spoke into her communicator. "Sergeant Velix, the Volcari engineer needs to reach the command center. I will escort him." There was a pause before Velix responded. "Granted. But be careful, Valdez. We are detecting heavy resistance near that building." "Understood." She grabbed Torvash by one of his arms and pulled him along as she moved toward the facility. They encountered a squad of Marauders guarding the entrance, and Kira hit them like a storm. She was among them before they could react, a combat knife in one hand and a rifle in the other. 4 enemies fell in as many seconds. Torvash stared at her with his skin flickering, shocked. White, but he did not hesitate to follow when she waved him forward inside the command center. He worked his magic. His 4 hands flew over alien consoles, bypassing security protocols and accessing systems that should have been locked. Within minutes, the Marauders lost their long-range communications. Within minutes after that, their automated gun turrets went offline. "None," Torvash announced, his skin bright with pride. "They are blind and deaf now." Kira allowed herself a small smile. "Good work. Now let us get back to the team." They emerged from the command center to find the battle turning in their favor. With their defenses disabled, the Marauders were falling back. The Concordat ground teams pressed forward, while overhead the Dravini cruisers provided air support. Victory was close. Kira could feel it, and then everything went wrong. She noticed it first as a change in the air support patterns. The Dravini ships were pulling back, repositioning away from the combat zone instead of pressing the advantage. "What are they doing?" she muttered. Then she saw the gap the Dravini withdrawal had created, a hole in the defensive perimeter, a corridor that led straight to the Concordat ground teams. The Marauders saw it too. Fresh enemy forces poured through the gap, dozens of them, more than Kira had seen in the entire battle so far. "Vorn, Captain." Relani's voice screamed over the comms from orbit. "What are you doing?" "Your forces are exposing our teams." The response came cold and calm. "Acceptable losses, Captain. The Volcari and the human are in the kill zone. I see no reason to waste Dravini lives protecting them." Kira's blood turned to ice. "You planned this," she breathed. "The Concordat is better without Deathworlders contaminating it." Vorn continued, "And the Valkyrie have opposed Dravini interests for too long. Today we solve both problems and blame the Marauders. Who will question it? Who will care?" The Kung channel filled with shouting. Relani demanding Vorn stand down, other ships calling for intervention. But it was all too late. The Marauders were already among them. Kira fought with everything she stood in front of Torvash and became a wall of violence that nothing could. Pass her rifle ran empty, and she used it as a club her knife broke. Inside an enemy's chest, and she used her fists, she was a Deathworlder. Born on a planet that killed everything weak, forged by millions of years of evolution into something that refused to die. But she was only one person, and there were so many enemies. Kira. Torvash called from behind her. She turned just in time to see the marauder aiming at her friend. She tried to move, tried to put herself between them. But she was too slow. The energy blast caught Torvash in the chest. He crumpled like a puppet with cut strings, his bioluminescent skin flickering wildly, nitrogen monoxide. The scream tore from Kira's throat. As she lunged forward, she killed the marauder who had shot him, then killed two more who tried to stop her. Then she was at Torvash's side, dragging his body behind cover as more fire scorched the air around them. Torvash, stay with me. She pressed her hands against the wound, but the damage was too severe. She could feel the heat of the blast injury, could see the way his light was fading. Kira, he whispered, and his voice was so weak, so different from the cheerful friend who had asked her about octopuses on her first day. Do not talk. Save your strength. Help is coming. But she knew help was not coming. The Dravini had made sure if Thattervash lifted one of his 4 hands and touched her face. You can survive this, he said. You are from a death world. You can survive anything. Go. Please go. I am not leaving you. You must. You must live, Kira. You must tell everyone what they did. Promise me. Tears were running down her face now, mixing with the blood and dust. Torvash, please. His skin flickered one last time. It was not fear or pain that she saw there. It was warm amber, the color of deep affection. The color he had shown her 100 times over 6 months of friendship. My best friend, he whispered, and then the light faded completely. He died looking up at her. His final color, a soft, peaceful blue that the Velkari showed only when they were at perfect peace. Kira held his body and screamed. She screamed until her throat was raw. She screamed while the battle raged. Around her, she screamed out all her grief and horror and rage, and then she stopped screaming. She laid Torvash's body down gently, carefully, the way you would lay down something precious. She removed his personal beacon from around his neck, a small device that held recorded memories that every Velkari carried. She tucked it inside her armor close to her heart. Then she stood up, and something in her eyes had changed. The surviving Concordat soldiers who saw her later would struggle to describe what they witnessed. They would say that she stopped being a person and became something else, something ancient and terrible, something that reminded them why the galaxy feared Deathworld. Skira Valdez picked up a fallen enemy's weapon and walked back into the battle. She did not run. She did not take cover. She just walked forward, and everything in her path died. The marauders broke and ran. The ones who stood their ground did not stand for long. Within an hour, the battle was over. Outpost Cayenne 4 was secured, but Kira was not finished, not even close. The battlefield fell silent, except for the crackling of distant fires and the moans of the wounded. Kira stood among the bodies of fallen enemies, her armor scorched and dented, her face splattered with blood that was not her own. She was breathing hard, but her eyes were calm in a way that frightened everyone who looked at her. Sergeant Velix approached carefully, the way you might approach a wounded predator. Valdez, he said quietly. It is over. We won. Kira did not respond. She was staring up at the sky where 3 Dravini cruisers still hung in orbit like metal vultures waiting for the feast to end. Valdez, Velix tried again. Kira, we need to regroup. There are wounded who need. How many? Kira interrupted. What? How many did we lose because of Warm? Velix hesitated before answering. 17 confirmed dead. 8 more wounded, mostly Velkari and Tirani who were in the exposed positions when the Dravini withdrew. 17 dead plus Torvish 18. Lives ended because a Dravini commander decided that some species were worth more than others. Kira felt something burning in her chest. Something hot and dark that she had spent her whole life learning to control on Earth. They called it many things. Rage, fury, the survival instinct. The killer inside humans had evolved on a world where hesitation meant death, where predators hunted you and the weather tried to kill you, and even other humans could be threats. To survive on Earth, you needed more than intelligence or tools. You needed the ability to become something dangerous when danger found you. Galaxy did not understand this. They looked at humanity's history of war and violence and saw only barbarism. They did not understand that every human carried inside them the potential for terrible destruction and the choice not to use it. Most humans went their whole lives without ever unleashing that potential. But when pushed far enough, when someone they loved was taken from them, when betrayal cut deep enough, the Deathworlder woke up. Kira started walking toward the dropship. "Where are you going?" Velix called after her. "To deliver a message. Valdez, you cannot just..." "The captain will want to debrief you, and there will be formal charges filed against Vorn." And Kira stopped and turned to face the sergeant. Whatever Velix saw in her eyes made him take a step backward. "Formal charges," Kira repeated, and her voice was flat and cold. "Vorn murdered my friend. He murdered 17 Concordat soldiers. He did it deliberately, and he admitted it over an open channel. And you want to file paperwork. That is how the Concordat handles." "The Concordat just showed me how it handles things." Kira cut him off. "The Concordat let a Dravini commander commit murder because humans and Velkari are expendable. Because we are not part of the species that matter." She stepped closer to Velix, and he flinched. "I'm going to show Commander Vorn what happens when you betray a human. I am going to show him what a Deathworlder really is. And when I am done, the entire galaxy will know that humanity is not expendable." She turned and kept walking. No one tried to stop her. The dropship was still functional despite some battle damage. Kira ran through the startup sequence with practiced efficiency while the comm system lit up with incoming transmissions. "Valdez, this is Captain Rolani. You are ordered to stand down immediately." Kira switched off the comm. She lifted off from the surface and pointed the dropship's nose toward the stars. The Dravini command cruiser was called the Iron Resolve, and it hung in high orbit surrounded by its 2 escort vessels. It was a warship, heavily armed and heavily armored, designed to destroy other ships and conquer worlds. Its defenses were state-of-the-art, capable of tracking and eliminating hundreds of targets simultaneously. But those defenses were designed to fight other warships. They were designed to counter missiles and fighter squadrons and organized military assaults. They were not designed to counter one small dropship flying an erratic, unpredictable pattern piloted by someone who had stopped caring whether she lived or died. Kira pushed the dropship to its limits. She flew like no tactical computer could predict because she was not following tactics. She was following instinct. The same instinct that had helped her ancestors outrun saber-toothed tigers and survive ice ages and cross oceans in wooden boats. The Dravini point defense cannons tried to track her, but she was never where they expected. She jinked and rolled and dove through their firing solutions like water through fingers. Twice her ship was hit by glancing blows. Once, a direct hit took out her secondary thrusters and sent her spinning. She corrected and kept going. The Iron Resolve grew larger in her view screen. She could see the whole plating now, could pick out individual gun emplacements and sensor arrays. The command cruiser was trying to maneuver away, but warships were not built for quick movements. They were built to absorb damage and dish it out, not to flee from a single dropship. Kira found what she was looking for. A maintenance access point on the lower hull. It was a small opening designed for repair drones, barely large enough for her dropship to fit through. She aimed for it. Valdez, Vorn's voice suddenly crackled over her comm. He must have overridden her systems. What do you think you are doing? You cannot possibly breach my ship. Kira did not respond. You are one human in a damaged transport. My ship has 3,000 crew members and enough firepower to glass a planet. You will die and accomplish nothing. She still did not respond. Her ship hit the maintenance access at full speed. Metal screamed against metal, alarms blared, and sparks flew, and for a moment she thought the impact would kill her, but the dropship punched through. She crashed into the maintenance bay in a shower of debris and flame. Her ship was destroyed, crumpled around her like a crushed can. But she was alive. She kicked out through the shattered cockpit and dropped to the deck. Red emergency lights bathed everything in crimson. An alarm was howling somewhere in the distance. Kira checked her weapons. One pulse pistol with half a charge. One combat knife she had taken from a fallen marauder. Her fists, it would be enough. She started moving through the ship. The first Dravini crew members she encountered were technicians, unarmed and terrified. She walked past them without a second glance. She was not here for them. The soldiers came next. They came in squads of 4 and 6, well-trained and disciplined, their gray faces grim with determination. They had heard what she was. They had prepared for her. It did not matter. Kira fought her way through them corridor by corridor. She took wounds. A burn across her shoulder, a gash on her thigh. Something cracked in her ribs. She did not slow down. Pain was just information. Her body telling her the damage had occurred on Earth. You learned to push through pain because stopping meant the lion caught you, or the winter killed you, or the enemy finished what they started. She pushed through. The deeper she got into the ship, the more resistance she encountered. Vern was throwing everything he had at her. Security teams and marine units and even crew members with improvised weapons. They all fell, not easily, not without cost, but they fell because Kira Valdez was not fighting like a soldier anymore. She was fighting like something older and more terrible. She was fighting like a human who had nothing left to lose. The corridor leading to the bridge was long and straight, and lined with the bodies of those who had tried to stop her. Kira walked slowly now, not from exhaustion, but from purpose. She wanted Vorn to hear her coming. She wanted him to count her footsteps and know that each one brought his judgment closer. Her pulse pistol was empty. She had discarded it 3 decks ago. Her knife was slick with blood that was not hers. Body ached in a dozen places, and she was leaving a trail of her own blood on the deck plating. None of it mattered. The bridge doors were sealed. Heavy blast doors designed to withstand shipboard combat and boarding. Actions. Kira studied them for a moment. Then she found the manual override panel and tore it open with her bare hands. The wiring inside was complex, but she had spent 6 months watching Torvash work. She had learned more than she realized. Sparks flew as she crossed connections and bypassed safeties. The blast doors groaned and began to open. Commander Celis Vorn stood waiting for her on the other side. He was flanked by his elite guard, 12 Dravini soldiers in heavy armor carrying the best weapons their military could provide. Behind them, the bridge crew cowered at their stations, trying to look small and unimportant. Vern himself was tall even for a Dravini. His gray skin stretched tight over angular bones. His silver eyes cold and contemptuous. He held no weapon. He did not think he needed one. One human, he said, and his voice dripped with disdain. You killed your way through my ship for what? Revenge? Justice? You cannot possibly think you will leave here alive. Kira stepped onto the bridge. The blast doors closed behind her with a heavy thud. I did not come here to leave alive, she said. I came here to teach you something. And what could a primitive Deathworlder possibly teach me? Kira smiled. And it was not a pleasant expression. I am going to teach you why my planet is classified as a place where nothing should survive. The elite guard opened fire while weapons discharged simultaneously, filling the air with deadly energy. But Kira was already moving. She had started moving before they pulled their triggers. She had read their body language, seen the tension in their shoulders, the slight shift in their stances. Humans were prey animals. Once they had learned to read predators to survive. Now Kira used that skill in reverse. She dove and rolled and came up inside their formation close quarters, where their superior numbers became a liability, where they risked hitting each other if they fired, where a Deathworlder with a knife was the most dangerous thing in the room. The fight lasted 30 seconds. It felt longer. It felt like hours of blood and screaming, and the wet sound of her blade finding flesh when it was over 12 elite Dravini. Soldiers lay dead or dying on the deck. Kira stood in the center of them, breathing hard. Her knife had broken somewhere around soldier number 8. She had finished the last 4 with her hands. Vern stared at her with something new in his silver eyes. Fear. Perhaps for the first time in his privileged life. "What are you?" he whispered. "I am human," Kira answered. "I am from Earth, a Category 7 Deathworld, a planet that tried to murder my species every single day for 4 million years." She walked toward him. "My ancestors survived ice ages and supervolcanoes and mass extinctions. They fought saber-toothed cats with wooden spears and won. They crossed oceans in boats made of wood and leather. They domesticated wolves and turned them into dogs. They looked at the entire planet and said, 'This is ours now.'" Vorn backed away until he hit his command chair. "Stay away from me." And then they looked up at the stars. Kira continued, "And they said, 'We want those too.' So they built rockets and space stations and colony ships. They spread across their solar system and then beyond it. And when they met the Concordat, they asked politely if they could join." She was right in front of him now. "They asked politely," she repeated. "They tried to be good neighbors. They followed your rules and served on your ships and died in your battles. And you repaid them with contempt. The Concordat will destroy you for this." Vorn snarled, but his voice shook. "You will start a war between our species." "No," Kira said, "I will not. Because you are going to live." For a moment, hope flickered in his eyes. Then Kira grabbed his right arm. "You are going to live," she said again. "But you are going to live marked. Every species in the Concordat is going to see what happens when you betray a human's friend." She twisted. Vern screamed. The sound that followed was wet and terrible. The sound of bones separating from socket, of flesh tearing, of something that should stay attached being forcibly removed. Kira stepped back, holding Commander Vorn's severed arm. He collapsed to the deck, clutching his shoulder, gray blood pumping between his fingers, his screams echoing off the bridge walls. The bridge crew stared in frozen horror. "Your commander committed murder," Kira announced to them. "He deliberately sacrificed Concordat soldiers because he did not consider them worth saving. He admitted this over an open channel. There will be a trial. There will be justice." She looked down at Vorn, who was writhing in agony. "But I wanted to make sure everyone remembers what he did. I wanted to give them something to remember." She turned and walked toward the emergency escape pods. No one tried to stop her. The bridge crew parted like water before a shark. She sealed herself inside a pod and launched. As the pod shot away from the iron resolve, she allowed herself to look at the arm she was still carrying. It was a trophy in the oldest sense of the word. Her ancestors had taken trophies from their enemies to prove their victories. They had mounted heads on walls and worn teeth as necklaces and carved notches into their weapons. The galaxy had forgotten that humans came from predator stock. They had looked at humanity's art and music and literature and seen civilization. They had forgotten what lay beneath. Kira had just reminded them. The pod's autopilot locked onto the Celestial Accord's beacon and began the journey. Back, she leaned her head against the cold metal wall and closed her eyes to ashes. Beacon was still pressed against her heart. She could feel it there, warm despite everything. "I got him," she whispered to her dead friend. "I got him for you. It does not bring you back, and it does not make the pain stop, but he will never forget what he did. No one will ever forget." She did not cry. She had no tears left, but she sat there in the darkness of the escape pod, holding a dead man's arm and a dead friends' memories, and she made herself a promise she would honor. Torvash's memory, she would prove that humans belonged in the Concordat. She would show that galaxy that humanity was more than violence and death. But she would also make sure they never forgot what happened when you pushed a human too. Far the escape pod drifted through the void toward the celestial accord. Kira Valdez drifted with it, and somewhere in the depths of her Deathworld or heart, she felt something like peace. Not forgiveness, never forgiveness, but the cold satisfaction of justice delivered by her own hands. The hangar bay of the Celestial Accord was silent as the escape pod touched down. Every member of the crew had gathered there. Dozens of beings from a dozen different species, all of them waiting to see what would emerge. Captain Relani stood at the front with her compound eyes fixed on the pod's hatch. Behind her were diplomats and soldiers and engineers and medical staff. Behind them were the survivors of the ground assault. The ones who had watched Kira transform from a crew member into something else entirely. The hatch hissed open. Kira Valdez stepped out into the harsh light of the hangar. She was covered in blood and burns and wounds that should have kept her unconscious. Her armor was shattered in places, held together by nothing but determination. In one hand she carried Torvash's personal beacon. The small device clutched against her chest like something precious. In the other hand she carried Commander Vorn's severed arm. The silence stretched on, and no one seemed to know what to say. Kira walked forward with slow, deliberate steps. The crowd parted before her without anyone giving the order to move. It was instinct. The same instinct that made prey animals clear a path for predators. She stopped in front of Captain Rolani and dropped Vorn's arm at her feet. "Evidence," she said in a voice rough from screaming and fighting, "for your formal charges." Rolani stared at the arm and then at Kira. "You boarded a Dravini warship alone," the captain said slowly. "You killed your way to the bridge. You mutilated a military commander, and you escaped. Yes, the Dravini High Command is already screaming for your head. They are calling this an act of war. They are demanding your immediate execution. Let them demand." A murmur ran through the crowd. Kira looked around at all of them, at the species who had doubted humanity, feared humanity, looked down on humanity as primitive newcomers from a dangerous planet. "My people come from a world that tried to kill us every single day," she said, and her voice carried across the silent hangar. "For 4 million years my ancestors fought for survival against everything our planet could throw at them." She held up Torvash's beacon. "And we did not just survive. We won. We conquered the storms and the predators and the diseases. We conquered each other in terrible wars that killed millions. We learned and we grew, and we became something that could reach the stars." Her voice cracked slightly, but she pushed on. "Torvash believed we belonged here. He believed the Concordat meant something. He was my friend, and he saw past the Deathworld label to the person underneath. He taught me that the galaxy could be better than fear and prejudice." She lowered the beacon and pressed it against her heart again. "So I am going to believe that, too. I am going to believe that what Commander Vorn did is not what this alliance stands for. I am going to believe that the Concordat is better than one murderous politician with delusions of superiority." She met Relani's compound eyes directly. "But if I am wrong, if anyone ever betrays humanity or our friends again, I want you to remember something." She gestured at Vorn's arm lying on the deck. "I did that alone. One human with a knife and a grudge. I walked through a warship full of soldiers, and I took what I came for." She looked around at the assembled crew. "And there are 8 billion more like me on Earth." The silence that followed was absolute. Kira could see the calculations happening behind their alien eyes. 8 billion Deathworlders. 8 billion beings forged by the same merciless planet that had created her. 8 billion people who might one day decide that the galaxy needed to learn the same lesson she had just taught Vorn. "The Dravini will not let this go," Rolani said finally. "There will be consequences." "Good," Kira replied. "Let there be consequences. Let there be a trial. Then every species in the Concordat hear what Vorn did and why I did what I did. Let them decide who was right and who was wrong. She took a step back. Torvash deserved better than to die because a Dravini commander thought his species was expendable. The 17 others who died deserve better too. If the Concordat stands for anything, it should stand for the idea that all members are valued equally. And if the Concordat decides against you, Relani asked, Kira shrugged, then humanity will know where it stands. And we will act accordingly. She turned and began walking toward her quarters. Crowd parted for her again. She made it 3 steps before a voice called out, Valdez. She stopped but did not turn around. The Valkyrie ambassador is requesting to speak. With you, Relani said. He wants to thank you for what you did for Torvash and for his people. Kira was quiet for a long moment. Tell him I did not do it for his people. She said finally, I did it for my friend. I would have done the same if Torvash had been any species, human or Valkyrie or Dravini or anything else. That is what friendship means to humans. She started walking again. That is what you should remember about us. We are not just dangerous. We are loyal. We protect the people we care about, and we avenge them when we cannot protect them. We are the kind of friends you want to have, and the kind of enemies you do not. She paused at the hangar door and looked back over her shoulder. The galaxy can choose which one we are. The choice has always been yours. Then she walked through the door and was gone in the hangar bay. No one moved for a long time. They stood there among the evidence of what one human had done, and they thought about what she had said. 8 billion. Number echoed in their minds. 8 billion Deathworlders from a Category 7 planet. 8 billion beings who had evolved to survive the unsurvivable. 8 billion potential allies or enemies, depending on how the galaxy treated them. Captain Relani bent down and picked up Vorn's severed arm. Get this to the medical bay for preservation, she ordered. It will be needed as evidence in the trial. There will actually be a trial, her first officer asked. Relani made a clicking sound that might have been a laugh. After today, there will be the most watched trial in Concordat history. Every species will want to know what happened here. Every species will want to see justice done. And the humans. Relani looked at the door, where Kira had disappeared. The humans have been trying to tell us who they are since they joined the Concordat. We just were not listening. We saw their art and their science and their diplomacy, and we forgot that all of it was built on a foundation of survival. She started walking toward the bridge. Today we remembered. Today, Kira Valdez reminded the entire galaxy what a Deathworld really produces. Not monsters, not savages, but survivors. Beings who will endure anything and overcome anything and who value loyalty above their own lives. The crew began to disperse, returning to their duties, but the conversations that started in that hangar would spread across the ship, and then across the fleet, and then across the entire Concordat. They would talk about the human who had avenged her friend. They would talk about the Deathworlder who had walked through a warship alone. They would talk about the warning she had given and the choice she had offered, and in her quarters, Kira Valdez sat alone in the darkness holding Torvash's beacon. She activated it and a hologram appeared. A recording Torvash had made weeks ago. In the recording he was laughing, his skin bright with happiness, telling some jokes she could not quite hear over the blood rushing in her ears. I miss you, she whispered to the hologram. I miss you so much. The recording kept playing. Torvash kept laughing. And Kira let herself cry at last. She cried for her friend and for the future they would never have. She cried for the innocence she had lost on that battlefield. She cried for the version of herself that had existed before today. The one who had still believed that being polite and patient would earn humanity's place in the stars. That version was gone now. What remained was something harder, something colder, something that would never forget and never forgive. But also something that would keep fighting for Torvash, for humanity, for the belief that the galaxy could be better than it was today. Kira Valdez Deathworlder, survivor, friend, avenger, wiped her eyes and stood up. There was work to be done, there was a trial to prepare for. There was a message to spread across every corner of Concordat space. Humanity was here. Humanity was staying, and the galaxy would never make the mistake of underestimating them again.